Today, Jesus offers us this kind of intriguing parable about, and there's a bunch of them, but we'll do one. But the last parable there about the old wine and the new wine, the new skins and the old skins. It's an interesting parable. And it ends with the person saying, the old is good. Now, I know almost nothing about wine. I'm going to tell you everything I know, and it won't take long, right? Comes in two different colors, right? People seem to care what you're eating, what color you pick, right? And it comes in cheap kinds that you drink out of a paper bag, right? Or really expensive stuff. And sometimes it's got bubbles in it. That's pretty much it. But the one thing that I do know, though, is that it seems like old stuff is better than the new stuff. I can't verify this, but they tell me this is true, right? Something that was made from really good grapes, 10 years ago is probably going to be better than the stuff that was made last week. Okay. And no one who has been drinking old wine desires the new, for he says the old is good. What's Jesus trying to get at here? He's not offering guidance in selecting wines, obviously. It's not his point. But he is dealing with this tension, right? We see at the beginning of the reading. And we see this all the time in the Gospels. This tension between the scribes and the Pharisees, right? The people who are holding on to, and really, in a very good sense, right? Defending the tradition that they inherited, right? And Jesus and his disciples who are coming in and who are offering kind of a new vision, a new way of living this tradition. That's probably a good way to put it, right? A new way of living an old tradition. But one of the challenges in that is the one who has been drinking old wine desires new. For he says the old is good, right? Everything was better back in the good old days, right? We fall into this all the time, and the older you get, the better those days get, right? But that's not the point of this exercise. One of the great English writers of the 20th century, Catholic, who left an incredible body of works, who was a philosopher, he was kind of just a writer in general, he was kind of an amateur theologian, as well as a critic of art and things like that. G.K. Chesterton, maybe you've heard of him. A lot of great writings, very worth reading today, right? Has a lot to say to the world we live in. Wrote an excellent interpretation of the life of St. Francis, even. Still very well worth reading, right? One of his great quotes, and maybe you've heard this and don't even know that it came from G.K. Chesterton, was that it's not that Christianity has been tried and found wanting, right? But rather, the Christian ideal has been found difficult and not tried. That's the point. That's the point of this reading today, right? It's even those of us who have professed the faith, who have faith, right? Heading into the future, heading into the new world, if you will, is hard, right? As the world changes, right? We are not of the world, but we live in it, right? And we have to deal with what the world presents us. The world's values are not ours, right? But the world's values are always adapting and changing. It's like the virus, right? It's always mutating. It's finding new ways to cut us down all the time, right? There are things today that cause incredible problems in Christian life that didn't exist 50 years ago. Right? So, like the internet. God bless the internet. Many of you are experiencing this liturgy today because of the internet, but there's an awful lot of dark there. Right? Again, the virus of evil mutates. Right? How do we deal with this? And the temptation would be to say, oh, forget about that. Right? Let's just go back to the past. Forget about say having something to relate to with the modern world or the postmodern world, really. Right? Let's just go back to the past. Things were better then. I'll just live in the 1950s. Right? Well, we can't do that. But there is a temptation, right? Because no one who has been drinking old wine desires the new. After a while, you lose kind of a taste for this. After a while, this whole notion of progress gets old. Right? Because you realize that it's not really progress all the time. But Christianity needs to face that world. Christianity needs to have something to say to that world. Right? We need to not just give up. Right? There are lots of things in our world that need attending to. There are lots of aspects of our world that need the Catholic voice. Right? Because even Catholics aren't speaking the Catholic voice today in some places. Right? That's the challenge. Right? We can't fall into the trap of saying, well, we tried it. Hence, Christianity doesn't work. Forget it. Let's move on to something else. Right? But it is difficult. Right? The new wine is difficult. It's challenging. So let's try it. Let's see what we can do. Let's see what does our voice have to say to the world in which we live? And again, not that we want to become revolutionaries, because that's just a power trip, right? I'm sure many of you come from places that have known revolutions, right? It's one thug taking over after the old thug, right? We don't need to change structures. We need to change our hearts. Starting with ourselves, right? And hopefully, by living and being a good example, right, changing the world, or at least challenging it. May the Lord help us with that. Help us to be the new wine in this world.